I never expected a single text to erase 15 years of family. But it happened anyway, delivered in the cold glow of my phone screen, stripped of emotion, stripped of mercy. Just a few words, plain and final, sitting there like a verdict already. Cast, don't call or don't come. It's over between us. Seeing my name attached to it felt wrong, like it belonged to someone else entirely. The tea I'd been holding slipped from warm to forgotten, cooling in my hand as the room around me fell unnaturally silent. My apartment, usually comforting in its stillness, suddenly felt hollow. I sank onto the couch, stared at the floor, and whispered the only answer I had left in me. Got it. My name is Elena. I'm 33 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my place in my family was never guaranteed. I existed on the edges, useful when needed, invisible when not. Even as a child, I understood that I wasn't the chosen one. That role belonged to my brother, Jason. Jason had always been the golden child. Every success of his was celebrated loudly. Every success of mine was acknowledged briefly, politely, then forgotten. My sacrifices disappeared into the background, uncounted. Still, for years I believed in family with an almost reckless devotion. I gave without keeping score, trusted without question, until the night I overheard my parents discussing their plans to leave everything to him. The text that followed didn't shock me. It simply confirmed what I had already begun to understand. From the outside, we looked like any successful family. My father owned several restaurants across Portland, each one stamped with his name in bold gold lettering, Haste Dining, the crown jewel of his pride. My mother handled the finances, meticulous and quiet. Jason moved through life with effortless charm, confident, magnetic, the kind of man who bent rooms toward himself, and I was the unseen support beam. I handled the payments no one talked about, the favors no one acknowledged, the financial rescues, emotional cleanups, practical solutions, all carried silently, all expected without thanks. Holiday photos told a convincing lie, perfect Christmas cards, coordinated sweaters, forced smiles catching the light of the tree. But behind the lens, there was a hierarchy I could never climb. My father liked to tell me, Jason has business in his blood. When he spoke of me, his tone changed. You have art, he'd say, as if it were an inconvenience I insisted on carrying. Jason was rewarded for recklessness. I was punished for precision. At 14, he got a brand new mountain bike. Mine came from a garage sale, spray-painted blue to match his. When I got a parking ticket at 17, my car privileges disappeared for a month, even when I was accepted into design school in Seattle, waving the letter like it was oxygen. They barely looked up. If you walk away from the restaurants, you walk away from this family, my father said. My mother stood behind him, silent. Jason smirked, already certain he'd won. So I left. Life beyond their shadow was brutal at first. I worked nights as a waitress, tutored younger design students during the day, survived on caffeine and instant noodles. I sent postcards home year after year. None were answered, but I survived. Then I thrived. I graduated with honors. I returned to Portland and began taking small projects, apartments, offices, restaurants. There was irony in designing the same types of spaces my father built, only without his approval. By 33, clients trusted my judgment more than my family ever had. And still, when my mother fell ill, I didn't hesitate. Chemotherapy, radiation, specialists across state lines. I managed it all, appointments, flights, hotels, bills paid without question. When she went into remission, her gratitude arrived in a single message. Thank you for everything, sweetie. No call, no embrace. Just words on a screen. Years later, Jason called with a dream, a food truck. 6 months later, it collapsed. I sent him $25,000 to keep him afloat. Then another $15,000 when my father's restaurant equipment failed. Jason bragged about restructuring, never once acknowledging where the money came from. Love makes you give long after your accounts are empty, I told myself. But family isn't built on transactions, it's built on respect. And in my family, respect was never offered. So, when my father invited me to a family dinner to talk business, I said yes. I thought, foolishly, that they might finally want my input, Instead, I overheard the truth laid bare. Everything goes to Jason. She just goes on with her life. Jason is the future. My mother said nothing. Jason smiled. And in that moment, I understood. I had never been part of their legacy. I wasn't the daughter. I wasn't the future. I was the wallet they assumed would always show up. I hadn't planned to be there. I'd only come to retrieve an old design portfolio from the attic college sketches I needed for a client. The house smelled like pot roast, warm and familiar. For a brief second, it felt like home. Then my father's voice cut through the illusion. Everything goes to Jason. I froze. Years of sacrifice erased in a sentence. My mother didn't object. She didn't even pause. She just kept eating. I backed away quietly, gripping the banister like it might keep me upright, then left without a word. The drive home replayed every slight I'd ever ignored. Every unseen effort, every unreturned kindness. And then the text arrived. Don't call. Or don't come. It's over between us. No punctuation. No apology, just finality. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I opened my laptop instead and began scrolling through years of bank statements. Invoices, receipts, hospital bills, Jason's food truck, restaurant repairs, prescriptions. Every line item another invisible chain, tying me to them. And for the first time, I broke it. Click. Cancel, click. Cancel. Each severed payment echoed louder than any argument ever had. A rebellion only I could hear. Then I opened the folder from their attic, my old design portfolio. The work they'd dismissed, the ideas they'd mocked. Each page was proof of my worth. I called an old contact from a hospitality conference, a project manager at Pacific Restaurant Group. Remember that sustainability concept I mentioned? I asked casually. The full proposal's ready. Can we meet tomorrow? They said yes. That night, the phone lit up endlessly. Jason, Dad, Mom. I ignored every call. By midnight, every financial tie was gone. What remained was silence. And in that silence, something unfamiliar settled in me. Not grief, not fear. Just freedom. The next morning, an email waited. Loved your concept. Can we meet tomorrow to discuss partnership? By noon, the messages turned frantic. Restore payments immediately. You're ruining us. I poured coffee and whispered, I don't owe you anything. That evening, Jason confronted me outside my office, rage trembling beneath his words. You think you can just walk away? No, I said quietly. I think I finally stopped pretending we're family. 3 days later, Madison appeared at my office, tear-streaked, holding a folder. Inside, receipts, bank statements, and evidence. Jason had been siphoning funds from Dad's restaurants for years. Madison, I whispered, heart racing, you just gave me everything I needed. The next afternoon, Dad, Mom, and Jason were at Bridge Cafe. Downtown. I arrived calm, prepared. I laid the evidence before them. Madison's folder, the proof of Jason's theft, my portfolio proving my vision and worth. Dad's face went pale. Mom's lips parted in shock. Jason's smirk vanished. I sold me proposal to Pacific Restaurant Group for $500,000. Silence filled the cafe. Let's see how your chosen son saves you now, I murmured, standing tall. They had thought cutting off would destroy me, but all it did was allow me to rise. That evening, I walked into the rain, feeling alive, free, and untouchable. Peace had a taste he'd never known. The morning after Thabridge Cafe confrontation, I woke to a quiet apartment. The city outside buzzed as usual, oblivious to the storm I had unleashed on my family. I poured coffee, sat at my desk, and watched the rain streak down the window. Each drop mirrored the calm in my chest. The kind of serenity that only comes from finally reclaiming your life. Jason didn't call that morning. Dad didn't email. Mom didn't text. And that silence, it was sweeter than any applause I'd ever received. For years, I had carried their expectations, their disappointments, their financial burdens, every sacrifice I made, every sleepless night, every dollar sent to bail them out. It had been mine to give, and I gave it willingly, but they had never acknowledged it, never defended me, never truly seen me. Now they would see me, but not the May that begged for approval, the May that silently bore the weight of their family empire. They would see the May that had risen above, the May that had turned their ignorance and entitlement into fuel for me own success. By noon, the news reached me through a flurry of social media alerts and whispered calls from friends. Jason had been reported to the authorities. The missing funds, now fully documented and traced, thanks to Madison's meticulous work, had been classified as embezzlement. Civil suits and criminal charges were already underway. Every restaurant dead-owned, each location, each asset was being audited. With lawyers questioning every past transaction, I sipped my coffee, leaning back in my chair. It wasn't revenge in that traditional sense. I hadn't needed to yell, hadn't needed to confront them violently or publicly humiliate them. Their downfall was the natural consequence of their choices and me decision to finally step away. Madison had been invaluable. She had been engaged to Jason, had witnessed firsthand his recklessness, and had carefully documented everything over the last several years. When she handed me the folder, tear-streaked and trembling, she had said, "I can't marry him. I won't marry someone who steals from his own family." And in that instant, I knew the final pieces were falling into place. Dad's first reaction to the audit news was disbelief, followed by panic. He had built his empire on appearances, on loyalty, and on the illusion that Jason was the future. Now, with Jason facing legal consequences, the company's finances in disarray, he realized just how little control he had ever had. Mom, ever silent, had begun to understand the cost of her inaction, the cost of never defending me, of letting Jason take every opportunity while I worked in the shadows. By the end of the week, the full scope of their losses became public. Bankruptcy filings were everywhere. Employees were being laid off. Suppliers demanded immediate payment for debts Jason had mismanaged. Their world, which had once seemed so unshakable, crumbled beneath them. And me? I watched it all from the safety of my apartment. My business thriving. My $500,000 deal with Pacific Restaurant Group had gone through without a hitch. I had positioned myself to expand, to grow, to take risks and reap rewards without waiting for approval from the family who had never supported me. Even then, I didn't gloat. I didn't post pictures of my success or send taunting messages. The satisfaction was quieter, more profound. It was in the knowledge that I had finally prioritized myself, that I had severed the chains of obligation and finally walked freely. Weeks passed. Jason's court dates began. Each hearing confirmed what I already knew. The family I had loved and sacrificed for would never be mine. Their empire had crumbled, but I remained unbroken. Mom reached out once, hesitant, timid. Her message was short. "Elena, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry." I stared at it for a long moment. My fingers hovered over the keyboard and then I typed one word, slow and deliberate. Understood. It was not forgiveness, not reconciliation. It was acknowledgement, recognition that I had survived, that I had grown, that it was no longer defined by their approval or their neglect. Business continued to flourish. I expanded my design firm, hired a team of talented individuals who respected me and my vision, and opened projects that challenged me creatively and financially. Clients trusted me because I delivered results, because I had proven through my work that I was capable, independent, and resilient. The city became my stage, my accomplishments, my affirmation. Occasionally, I thought of them, not with anger, not with longing, but with detached curiosity of someone who has outgrown their past. I wondered if Dad had learned humility, if Mom had learned courage, if Jason had learned accountability. But those were questions I no longer needed answered. Their world was theirs. Mine was mine. Madison stayed in my life, a friend andally guiding me through some of the more complicated aspects of Jason's legal aftermath. Her courage had been pivotal in bringing truth to light. Andy was grateful beyond words. We often met for coffee, discussing projects, life, and the strange way that justice sometimes unfolds. Not with a bang, but with quiet, persistent pressure. One evening, I found myself walking past old Hayes' family home. It looked fearsome from the outside, familiar and unaccustomed. I paused,
taking in the sight. Memoria surged. Christmas mornings, birthday parties, the endless sense of being overlooked. I
didn't feel pain. I didn't feel regret. I felt free. I walked inside briefly, just to stand in the spaces I had once inhabited. Empty rooms. Echoes of laughter that had never been directed at me, shadows of a family that had failed me. I smiled faintly. The house was theirs, not mine, and that was exactly as it should be. As I left, I realized something important. The best revenge isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It doesn't require confrontation or humiliation. The best revenge is building a life so complete that those who try to hold you back cannot touch it, that they cannot diminish your achievements, cannot erase your growth, cannot sway our confidence. By the time the first snow fell that winter, I had grown more than I ever had in those years of servitude to my family. My firm had taken on 3 major international projects. My designs were featured in leading magazines. I was respected, admired, and independent, and through it all, there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that I had done it all on my own terms. Jason, Dad and Mom remained the figures in the background of my life. Occasionally, I heard snippets, news of bankruptcy filings, court decisions, or small mentions in gossip columns. Each reaffirmed what I already knew. I had broken free. I had claimed my own destiny. One evening as I walked along the waterfront, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I paused to reflect. The city shimmered in amber and gold, lights reflecting off the water. I felt the weight of the past lift from Miss Holders. For the first time in my life, I wasn't running from pain, from expectation, from disappointment. I was running toward possibility. And in that moment, I realized the final truth: family's not defined by blood or inheritance or shared history. Family is defined by respect, support, and love. I had given them every chance to be my family. They had failed, but I had succeeded in creating my own world. A life rich with purpose, filled with allies, built on the foundation of my own resilience. I whispered to the cold evening air, "Got it." The words weren't for them, they were for me. I continued walking, each step steady, each breath deep. Behind me, the city pulsed with life, oblivious to the quiet revolution of one woman's independence. I had not just survived. I had thrived. I had reclaimed my name, my worth, and me peace. And that, more than money, more than recognition, more than revenge, was the victory I had longed for all my life. By the time I returned home, the first stars were shining. I poured a glass of wine, settled into my studio, and opened me laptop.
Half.
$1 million sat in me account, yes, but more importantly, a lifetime of effort, integrity, and vision had paid off in ways that no amount of betrayal could ever touch. And in the silence of my apartment is me let. Peace, freedom, vindication, everything I had ever wanted finally. No text, no argument, no confrontation could ever undo it. They had tried to erase me, but I had served, grown, and built something unbreakable. The city lights glittered outside, and I realized that life finally was mine. Not borrowed, not conditional. Mine. And that was worth every moment of the struggle, every sleepless night, every overlooked sacrifice, because I had become my own family. And no one could take that away.